All attend.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Courtney Scales from CCIQ and I'm your facilitator for today. Joining us today from Toshiba is Corey Williamson and Kieran Clegg. What we are about to hear today possibly sounds very familiar to those online. That same old story of someone in the office working late, chasing that deadline, and they find themselves searching for a document that a colleague worked on. You can't seem to find it, it's after hours, and you can't reach them to ask them where they saved the document. Well, today, Corey and Kieran will take you through how using cloud technology can save you from this situation and ensure you're managing your documents efficiently and storing your data in a legally compliant way. Before we start, if you would like to ask Corey or Kieran a question, you can do so at any time during the webinar using the chat box that appears in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And let's get started.
Thanks, Courtney. Corey Williamson here, and there's my colleague Kieran. We're really excited to be online with everyone today and to talk through how to work smarter with the cloud. So we work with businesses of all types, all sizes, every single day, and it means we get to see what's working well and also some things that aren't working so well. So we've put together a few thoughts and a few best practices that hopefully there's a few takeaways for everyone today. We'll kick off just to let you know what we'll cover. We'll start off with what we're talking about. What is it? We'll move into some of the benefits, some of the things we see working well, as well as some of the gotchas and the troubles or the problems that we see people fall into, as well as what's next, what's the next level, what else can you do with it. So we'll kick into what is the cloud, and really I think it's probably something that we've all asked ourselves what it is. No one really necessarily knows what it is straight up, and I think it's an interesting question. So we've got a little video that might explain, or maybe not.
Video's worth a few more, I suppose. Look, it's funny really because it's true, and I suppose despite our different backgrounds, at some point in time or another, most of us have sat down and asked ourselves the question, what is the cloud? And I suppose from my point of view, and quite simply put, I like to think of the cloud as really digital storage and software services delivered through the internet. Or even more simply put, as the slide says, a server in another building, if you really want to break it down to its very essence.
I love that. I love breaking it down to its very essence. I love when it's simple, and that is a very, very simple definition.
Just like a fine wine or whiskey, mate.
Yeah. I'm also partial to breaking things too. So I guess what we probably want to do is just talk specifically about what we're talking about today. So what we're really talking about, it's a pretty big concept. But what we're really seeing with small businesses are ways they're using cloud storage apps. So it's things like your Google Drive, your Dropbox, your OneDrive, Box. Some of the bigger ones that are out there, but there are plenty of them. And the reason people are choosing to use these is because they're getting real results. They're getting real benefits for their business. So they're leveraging off the power of some of these massive companies, Google, Microsoft, who have put together great technology that they can use and wouldn't have access to otherwise, but to help make themselves better for their customers, to help make it better for their staff, and ultimately, I guess, to improve their bottom line. So the benefits we see fall into six real categories in lots of businesses. So the first one being easy.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Corey. As you pointed out, or as we will point out, there are a number of really key benefits to leveraging cloud apps. So I suppose, why is it considered simple and easy to interact with? Well, if you look at it, number one, it's easy to sign in and access. 2, it's easy to share information. And 3, it's easy to set up.
Yeah, that ease of setup is what also drives people towards it. Not all small businesses have the technological expertise, but something like this, it's pretty much click and play, and you can figure it out yourself. But it's also flexible, and that's what makes it really easy. Is that you can start with something simple, and it can grow with you. You can grow by the amount of storage, the number of people using it, how you're using it, and you can set it up to work with how your business needs it, how it makes sense. It's not this fixed, rigid thing. It's something that you can adapt to the way you want to do business. That also makes it cost effective. In its most simplest terms, it's cheap storage, and it's cheap storage that someone else is looking after, someone else's job to make sure it works. And when you use it to drive benefits within your business, to make your staff more efficient, those benefits have a massive payoff, and they make it really easy for you. It's also a limited commitment, which you're not signing up for some ginormous product or some long-term contract. It's something you can dip in and out of as it makes sense.
Yeah, agreed. And look, as far as multi-platform goes, really, in this day and age, whether you're using a laptop, tablet, mobile phone, PC, whether it's Android or Apple, you should really be able to access cloud apps, or most of the cloud apps out there. And I'd really say this has got to be one of the greatest strengths of leveraging cloud apps today. Not only that, though, but due to its very nature, the cloud serves as really an awesome platform for collaboration. Little bit of a mute button there.
Yeah, sorry, Q. That collaboration is key. It's something that we see, one of the biggest reasons people use it. And it's not just collaboration between people within your team or in your staff. It's also collaboration between you and your customers. So it's people working on projects together, working on a project with a customer, and making sure that everyone's working from the same set of documents, maybe the same project plan, and that you're not emailing a document to someone that they're then editing, doing something, sending it back to you. You're sending it on to someone in your team who's making a change, and no one knows who's using what. So collaboration's a massive one. It's a very big benefit for businesses.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And finally, to touch off on accessibility, look, it doesn't really matter who's using it or where. It's essentially always available. And not only that, as Corey touched on, it's also somebody else's job to not only keep it up and running, but also to ensure that backups are being performed appropriately. So accessibility is really key in terms of cloud apps.
And I think it's really important probably to put out there as well that there's so much debate. There's debate online. There's debate between professionals about these cloud storage apps and the benefits of them. And all of these benefits, there's a bit of a double-edged sword. They can be perceived as weaknesses for one reason or another. You know, the simplest one is you don't have access to the internet. But what really cuts through, and what we see, I guess, as the biggest point that renders it a bit of a moot argument, is that accessibility and the accessibility and the collaboration. That's how we're seeing people benefit most from it. And it's not that it's something that's coming in the future. It's not the way of the future, it's the way of the now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Look, recently I had, I suppose, the privilege of attending and completing a degree as a mature age student, and as a result was thrown into, I suppose, the deep end in terms of working collaboratively with cloud apps whilst I was at uni. And I'll never forget a great story. I was sitting in one of my first workshop sessions with a group whilst they were rather flippantly throwing around the term G Drive. You know, we'll upload our photos here, we can put our survey results there. Once you review the final doc and you post it here, just use the G Drive, we'll share it there. And rather sheepishly towards the end of the session, I had to kind of put up my hand and say, hey guys, that's great, but what is this G Drive? And is it a resource that the university provides here on site? Is it something, you know, that I can access? And I suppose you can imagine I got a couple of quizzical looks and a few laughs, and was basically told, look, mate, G Drive means Google Drive, and if you haven't set one up, you better set one up, because this is how we use, or this is how we collaborate and share our information for our workshops moving forward. So that kind of put me on really a bit of a crash course in terms of using cloud apps for collaboration moving forward at uni, and it really highlighted the point of how important and flexible and useful it is.
And that's something that's really important for businesses, is that it is flexible, but it's also, you know, the people you're at uni with are the ones that are going into the workforce, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I suppose, you know, not only that, but it really dispels some of the myths or the debate around the pros and cons surrounding the usefulness or the how applicable cloud apps are today, in the fact that, you know, there's a generation moving through university, or that's already coming through university, that, you know, they don't really care about the debate necessarily. They're more focused on, do I have access to functionality and applications that I'm used to interacting with on almost a second nature basis? And, you know, I suppose that's a really important takeaway.
Absolutely. And, you know, when you read all the stats about the demographics in the workforce and the rise of the millennials, the statistics around 50% of the workforce by 2020 will be millennials, and by 2025, 2030, they're talking 75% will be millennials or younger. And these are the digital natives. That's, you know, that's the new workforce of small businesses over the next 10 years. And it's also the new customers. So as millennials create or make up a bigger portion of the workforce, they're also in more senior positions. So they're the ones making the decisions. And being digital natives, you know, just like the kids teaching you a few lessons at uni, they want it easy. You know, they want it now. They want to tap it and scan it. They want to tap it and print it. They want it on their phone. They want it on their laptop. They want it everywhere. They just need to have it in front of them. So it's really important for us to think about that as we're moving forward. And you know, at Toshiba, we were going back a few years now, we were helping schools, mostly high schools, getting information in and out of Google Drives. And we saw the schools, they were really the first adopters of this stuff and real genuine users of it. And those kids are the workforce of the future.
You're exactly right, mate. And those are some really powerful stats too. But I suppose to maybe help illustrate the point even a little bit further, I've previously worked with a franchise within the medical industry where literally during a site audit, whilst we were moving through the environment looking to consolidate equipment and streamline their processes from a print perspective, one of the younger employees actually physically pulled me aside and said, look, Hugh, we really appreciate, you know, all the effort that you guys are putting in here, and you're going to generate some cost savings, and that's all great. But, and then he kind of turned around and he pointed at two employees within the building, and he looked at me and he said, look, as soon as these two co-workers move on, all the work that you're doing here is really going to become, I suppose, obsolete. And from his point of view, he said, look, they're going to, as soon as they move on, they're going to move to a fully digital environment, and all of the equipment is essentially going to become obsolete. And I thought it was a really powerful statement from, you know, somebody that was really young within that organization.
100%, absolutely. And, you know, they might not have even had that conversation in front of those two guys. I don't know, but I know that's what they're expecting.
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that. I get the feeling that he may have raised it and was potentially vetoed, or the opinion was vetoed, which just, you know, further illustrates the point that change is coming. As soon as that level of employee starts to move into a decision-making position, change is going to happen, and it is already happening now.
100%. So if we accept that it's happening, you know, the change is here. It's not what industry, it's not when, it's now, and it's here. We need to make sure we get it right, and we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's going to actually bring benefits as opposed to maybe some future problems. So if there's one piece of advice that I could give to anyone, it's that it's important to get the foundations right from the beginning. Don't just start throwing stuff in. And I love this graphic that's up on the screen, because on the right-hand side, that sort of is representing everything that's digital anyway, but it's disorganized, it's chaotic, and it's possibly more time-consuming for the people that are using it. Whereas if you look to the left-hand side, you can see it's ordered, it's valuable, it's easy for people to use, and so it's going to save your staff time. And I just think it's a really simple way to see what to and what not to do, really. So when you think, Hugh, of your top tips for getting the foundations right from the beginning, what are the first things that come to mind?
Look, you're exactly right. Setting solid building blocks from the, let's call it the foundation, and then layering on top of that in terms of functionality, setting that base of solid building blocks is extremely important. And from my point of view, I think a really good place to start is with another potential buzzword, which is taxonomy. But what we essentially mean by taxonomy is your folder structure, applying some logic and some thought to the folder structure that's going to house your information within a cloud app. You can see, as Corey alluded to, the graphic that's on the screen. If you head down the left-hand side of the graphic, or up rather to the left-hand side, you've got accounts, contracts, and invoices, then 3 folders. That essentially could represent the starting point for a structured taxonomy once you've applied some strategy and some thought to it. And it's probably a pretty good segue for a second and arguably another important, or as equally as important point, which is naming conventions. And naming conventions also apply to the taxonomy itself, but not only that, but to the documents that sit inside the folders themselves. So assigning an appropriate taxonomy up front that is logical and makes sense and facilitates efficiency and searchability into the future is really critical.
So I guess summing it up, you're talking get the folder structure right and get the names right.
Yeah, if you want to make it that simple, absolutely. Taxonomy sounds better though.
And so, look, those 2 things I think are really important. I totally agree. And they relate whether you're storing information just for access later, or whether you're using information to collaborate. The right folder structure means you can give access to the right person to the information in that folder. So those tips are great because they cover off both real uses, storing and collaborating.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think there's another, just while you were talking, I was thinking there's another important point that, a lot of the time you think of storage as information flowing one way to a final destination or storage point within a folder structure, let's say, but it's actually important to think of it as almost a bi-directional process, because information that goes into a resting place ultimately has to come back out. And that's why I suppose it emphasizes the point again that getting those naming conventions and the taxonomy right will again assist with searchability well into the future.
That really sort of dovetails into what I think are 2 really critical points as well. So thinking about how you get information in and how you get information out, we see that done really poorly very often. And one of the worst mistakes people make is when they're trying to get documents. You might have a contract signed by a customer or a work order or whatever it is, and they pop it on a printer or a scanner, just scan it into their email address, then they open up the email and the file, and then they look what it is, rename it, save it into another file, and then drag it to its final resting place. And that is just hideously inefficient, and it's just rife for someone to make a mistake, which is a real problem. There's much smarter ways to do that. But the other thing as well is to make sure that when you do get that document in there, that it's searchable. So one of the common misconceptions, because we look at a PDF document on our screen and it's been created on another computer, and we can search for text within that document, we think that all PDFs are the same, and they're not. So it's a really big tip for people to make sure they're scanning as searchable PDF. And that just means that it turns the text that's on that paper, when you scan it, into actual searchable text, so you can find the words that are there. If you've got a client called Elephant Zoo or, Monkey Paperclip, whatever it is, when you search the word Elephant Zoo, you should be able to find that text on that document, on that contract, on that really important bit of information. So it's really critical for people to remember that.
No truer words were ever spoken. Look, you can get, I suppose, the first 2 steps right, but if you are going to, or if your business process at some point in time is going to leverage or lean on information that's contained within the content of the document, as Corey said, really important to look at making that content searchable. And I suppose we're in a time now where having access to applications or systems and processes which will provide that, it's a lot more cost effective nowadays and more readily available too. And maybe just to help again illustrate some of the points that we've just made, I've recently, or as recently as last week, been working with a client who was looking to digitize documents in order to streamline the searchability and retrieval of those documents based on specific information. But unfortunately, upon closer analysis, we realized that some of the, I suppose, fundamentals had been slightly overlooked. And I literally got to witness firsthand how the client is actually, funnily enough, now in a worse off place than where they were before. And they've literally moved to actually moving back to physically retrieving and searching for files in a filing cabinet as opposed to using the new, supposedly better digital process. It's a pretty scary thought.
It's such a good point to raise, because we see it all the time as well. People think they're doing the right thing, scanning it in. They've got a digital document, not a piece of paper. And that is the right thing if you get the foundations right, but it gives them a false sense of security, and that can sometimes be a real problem. So I guess what we've got here, a couple of things just quickly to sum up, is the main things you want to make sure you do lay the right foundations from the beginning. Get your folder structure right, make sure your naming convention's right, and that the documents are searchable within your cloud app, whatever that may be. Also, make sure you put some business rules in place so people know how to get documents in and out, and that you communicate it so that everyone knows how to do it the same every time. And one little tip is to make sure you get business accounts. The amount of people we see who set up a personal Dropbox account and try and store their business documents in there, and that can cause problems with functionality, how they're searched, and it's just not best practice. So spend the extra few bucks and make sure you get the business account.
Yeah, exactly right. And maybe some of the don'ts and gotchas, just to wrap that section up, is don't expect your team to get it right from the get-go. There's a reason that you put in systems and processes to ensure that a process is followed in a structured and logical way and well into the future. Also, don't just start adding documents to a repository. As one of my previous stories highlighted, it can literally leave you worse off than when you started or where you were before. Also, don't think that necessarily digitizing a process is going to solve it if the process in itself is flawed. You need to look at ways, if you're going to digitize a process, look at ways along the way to, I suppose, streamline, optimize, and improve it whilst you're moving towards digitizing it. And then last but not least is subscriptionitis, another little buzzword that I think Corey came up with, but I really like it. And basically what we mean is due to the very nature of cloud apps being easy to set up, it lends itself to employees within a business leaning on multiple cloud apps as opposed to potentially focusing on specific cloud apps to then in turn generate desired business outcomes. So rather look to focus on some specific apps.
Almost sounds too easy. And yeah, you know, it actually is a little too easy. You can make it pretty complex, but if you follow some of the key things, key points, the key foundations, make sure you get them right, you kind of can't go too far wrong. So. And really, then once you've done that, the world is your oyster. There's so many places you can take it, and that's one of the great things about these sort of tools is what you can do beyond just having some documents in a cloud storage. They link in with so many different things. They take you into this automation space.
Figure out how to use that mute button. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I suppose when we look to move to that next level, what do we really mean by automation? It is an extremely broad term, but in this instance, what we're referring to or what we're pushing towards is really letting a computer perform simple and repetitive tasks for us or on our behalf. That's it really in a nutshell.
Yeah, we're seeing a real trend for small businesses moving towards some simple automation to save their staff time. So one great example is we've had loads of customers now that were doing simple things like at the end of the day, their team members or their staff out on the road were bringing in work orders or proof of delivery slips or something like that, which they were scanning in and into an email address to rename them, to save them in a folder and put them in some in a cloud storage app, which was sort of, you know, taking anywhere between 30 and 40 minutes a day. So we can set up some great little automation tools that will take that scanned document. It'll read the order number on there, rename it for them, and drop it in the right folder every single time. So taking that sort of 40-minute job and making it a 30-second job at the end of each day without any errors. And it's those little things that then allow that staff member to do more valuable things, bringing in more revenue, better customer service, all that sort of stuff. there really is some great tools that you can employ, and plenty of them. You can you talk to your technology provider about some of them, or just Google them. You know, there's some great ones. IFTT, which is if this then that. If you're using Google Drive or OneDrive, there's some great little automation tools that are in there. It might take a document you've put somewhere and do something with it. Google Forms are a great way to get people to use forms that then you don't have to have someone in your team rekeying information off a paper-based form from one of your clients into a system of some sort. Even as simple as connecting your note-taking apps that some of your teams are using, you can have them automatically go into task scheduling apps and things like that. So the automation's a really fun thing, and it doesn't have to be on a grandiose scale. Sometimes it's taking a simple job that takes 30 to 40 minutes a day and turning it into a 1-minute job. Is all you need to do. But there are some really great tools out there to be able to check them out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I suppose maybe just one final point from my point of view, looking at things slightly differently, is, you know, next level automation, not only does it generate time savings along the way with, you know, automating repetitive tasks, but it also, a really key factor is removing human error along the way. I mean, a machine really does have the ability to perform the same task every time without rest. So really powerful, even though it is a broad term, really powerful little segment.
Alrighty, so we do have a couple of questions. The first one is concerning safety. Are my documents safe given the recent attacks on software?
Look, it's a really good question. Safety is really something that I think, despite where you house information, whether it's physically in a filing cabinet or whether it's digitally online in a cloud app, safety is obviously a concern. I think you want to look to lean on applications, in mainstream applications, to improve levels of safety. But in a nutshell, there is inherent risk with moving towards a digital platform. It's, I suppose, about minimizing that risk. So are they 100% safe? Nothing's 100%, but they do have measures and processes in place to, I suppose, ensure safety at the highest level, really.
Yeah, and there's also one app, if safety is an issue, to check out Mega, M-E-G-A, which is a New Zealand-based cloud storage app. Their whole premise is on security. It's all fully data encrypted. It's a good one to check out if that's an issue for you. But I think we're running out of time, but there's a couple of great sites you can use to check out and compare a few of the different apps. So Tech Radar is one, PC Mag and CNET. Those three have some really great comparison sites where you can see the differences between some of these apps, and you can compare whether they're right for your business, and just make sure you remember those foundations, those fundamentals. If you get them right from the beginning, you'll be better in the end.
Thank you so much, Corey and Kieran, and I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties we've experienced. That is all the time we have for today. On behalf of CCIQ, I would like to thank Corey and Kieran from Toshiba for taking the time to present today. I would also like to thank everyone who has joined us for today's session. All registrants, you will receive a copy of the webinar recording and the presentation slides next week. And thank you again for joining us today, and I do look forward to welcoming you to another CCIQ webinar in the very near future. Thanks again.